You know, these borders, and I also mentioned to my brother, these borders that you create silos for yourselves amongst, you must always remember, are not your creation. These were creations of people outside of this continent who made these borders not to develop you, but to extract from you. Now that you want to develop yourself, we must start looking at these borders, and we must start removing the barriers that we have put, that have defined us in the past, and now hinder us from being the giant that we should be.
Something historic has just shaken Southern Africa. Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana have erased the lines that once divided them. No more passports, no more barriers, just one borderless alliance. For Africans, this is hope. For the West, it's panic. And for the world, it's proof. A new Africa is rising. Namibia has taken a bold first step, allowing citizens of Zambia and Botswana to cross borders using nothing but their national ID cards. Supporters are calling this move historic, a quiet revolution in the making. Critics, however, warn that the challenges of implementation could test the limits of regional cooperation. On the surface, it may look like a simple administrative change, but analysts say it strikes at the very heart of Africa's colonial legacy. The borders drawn by European powers were never meant to unite Africans. They were designed to divide, to weaken, and to make nations dependent on outside control. For decades, those lines have kept farmers from markets, traders from opportunity, and families from one another. Now, three nations are saying, no more. Supporters argue this is more than a symbolic gesture. For farmers, it means crossing borders without being crushed by paperwork. For traders, it opens new corridors of business, cutting costs and unlocking markets that were once closed. And for families, many of whom were separated by arbitrary colonial lines, it represents a chance to rebuild bonds across nations. Critics, however, caution that tearing down borders on paper is easier than in practice. Concerns remain about smuggling, security risks, and whether fragile economies can withstand sudden shifts in trade flows. Some commentators suggest that without proper infrastructure and policy alignment, this vision of free movement could falter. But even with those warnings, the political significance is hard to ignore. By trusting each other enough to open their borders, Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana are testing what Pan-African unity could look like in practice. Analysts point out that this echoes the dreams of leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere, who argued that Africa's strength lay not in division, but in integration. And perhaps most importantly, this agreement reframes identity itself. A Zambian crossing into Namibia with just an ID card no longer feels like a foreigner. A Botswana trader in Katima Mulilo is not just a visitor, but a participant in a shared regional economy. Supporters say this is how African unity begins, not in conference halls, but in the daily lives of ordinary people. Critics may continue to raise doubts, but if this borderless experiment succeeds, it could inspire a domino effect across the continent, pushing more nations to follow, and inching Africa closer to a reality where African Union is more than an institution in Addis Ababa. For now, the world is watching. Will this alliance truly deliver on its promises, or will it stumble under the weight of its own ambition? One thing is certain, history has been set in motion. Together, these nations hold some of the world's most valuable resources. Namibia with uranium and new oil reserves, Zambia with copper, the backbone of global technology, Botswana with diamonds, a gem that has fueled Western wealth for decades. By joining hands, they form a mineral-rich powerhouse that could shift global markets. And for the first time, Africa, not foreign corporations, could call the shots. This alliance is not happening in isolation. It echoes what we've already seen in the Sahel, where Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger stood tall, reclaiming their gold, their uranium, and their sovereignty. The message is the same. Africa can only rise when Africa is united. Supporters say the move is historic, but they also warn Africa must be wise. History has shown us a familiar pattern. Whenever African nations take bold steps toward independence and unity, pressure follows. Sanctions, smear campaigns, economic sabotage, even whispers of destabilization. To them, this is proof that the alliance is working, that it threatens entrenched powers who benefit from a divided continent. If there's pushback, it means we're on the right track, some commentators argue. Critics, however, caution against oversimplifying the threat. They point out that external pressure is real, but internal weaknesses can be just as dangerous. Corruption, poor governance, and lack of infrastructure, they argue, have derailed many African initiatives before. Analysts agree on one thing: panic is not strategy. Retaliation without wisdom only breeds chaos. If Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana want this alliance to endure, they must proceed carefully. Because as supporters stress, when people prosper, no foreign force, no sanction, no smear campaign can divide them again. Supporters describe this as more than just cooperation between three nations. They call it a spark that could spread to Angola, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and perhaps the entire continent. To them, this is Africa rewriting its story in real time. The Berlin Conference may have drawn our borders, one commentator noted, but Africans today are the ones erasing them. The symbolism, they argue, cannot be overstated. The very lines once meant to divide are now being challenged by Africans themselves. Critics, however, remain cautious. They point out that enthusiasm must be matched with practical steps: harmonized trade laws, security frameworks, and infrastructure that can handle the new flows of people and goods. Without these, they warn, the spark could fade before it becomes a flame. Analysts say both sides have a point. Symbolism matters. It inspires unity and reshapes identity. But lasting impact will depend on execution. If this model proves sustainable, it could set the tone for a broader transformation, a continent gradually dismantling colonial-era divisions, one border at a time. Supporters say Namibia, Zambia, and Botswana have proven something many once doubted: that unity in Africa is possible. The question now, they argue, is who will be next? Angola, Zimbabwe, South Africa. Each new nation that joins strengthens the momentum. Critics, meanwhile, urge caution. They warn that regional rivalries, fragile economies, and external pressures could slow the pace of expansion. The time for African unity is not tomorrow, not someday in the future. It is now.